a project that we are receiving a National Honor Award for this year that we finished in the past year. It's the Poetry Foundation in Chicago. The interesting story is Poetry Magazine started in Chicago in 1912 and is published continuously since then on a monthly basis on a shoestring budget. And about 10 years ago, they received a grant or a gift of money, and they started a foundation and decided to build a home for poetry in Chicago. One of the interesting things that they wanted when we started the project was a garden for the building. So the early part of the design was a strategy of how a garden and a building could be combined. And then the scheme that we ended up with is the one that you see here on the screen, with the garden kind of carved out of a virtual volume as described by the boundary of the L-shaped site. And we felt that site should have sort of a boundary, a sort of physical boundary to it. This is a site model kind of showing it in the context of Chicago, and some early sketches kind of working out the garden and the structural grid of the building. Later on in design development, you can see sort of an emerging tectonic of the building comprised of a series of layers of different materials of zinc, wood, and glass that come together and then would separate to create a slowly unfolding sequence. So the kind of architecture that we wanted to do was not the kind of building that could be consumed in a single glance, but the kind of building that you would have to walk through in a slowly unfolding sequence, almost like a poem unfolds line by line. So here you can see on the screen the layer of wood that wraps around the building. It starts as library shelves in the library, continues around and forms the working library for the staff before dropping down. There's a layer of glass that separates the inside from the outside. The garden is actually a hardscape of sandblasted concrete that extends inside the building. We wanted the public spaces of the building to feel like they were outside in the garden. And then finally a layer of black zinc, which is an oxidized zinc that wraps around the entire building. It's solid and then becomes perforated where it borders the garden to allow people to look into the garden. These are some early models kind of studying this diaphanous quality that we wanted for the screen that would wrap around the site. That when you look through from the street, you would be intrigued to see the garden and sort of be intrigued to kind of enter this world. This is the building as it was constructed, and you can see how the layers are sort of coming together and apart there. The garden is slightly raised from the city, so we wanted people to step up out of the city, kind of into this world, so they were removing themselves from the city to slow people down. This is the ground floor plan. There's a library, a gallery, and a poetry reading room for poetry readings, and you enter the building through the garden. This is the step that takes you up from the sidewalk into the garden, and there's no signage on the building except for in this step. It's a very mute black building. We wanted it to be a very pure building because poetry is a very pure art form, and we felt that the architecture should be reflective of that. So there's a little tribute area to Ruth Lilly, who gave the money for the building. And then one enters this kind of compressed, as you see on the right, this sort of compressed area where the layers are sort of coming together, and then you emerge out into this garden, and the library comes into view, announcing that you've entered a literary environment, and you can see the moss strips in that hardscape that guide you on a subtle path towards the front door. This is that same space at night. This is from inside the gallery, looking out, and the screen is has the optical quality being very easy to see out, but very difficult to see in from the street. This is a mock-up we made to test the sandblasted concrete slab. It includes every condition that we would encounter to kind of work out the details. And then the garden slab itself is, as I said, is a slab of sandblasted concrete where we selected a special stone, special sand, special cement, and the idea was to really elevate the materials, do like a poet uses with words. We wanted to take very simple materials, corrugated metal, concrete, plywood, and elevate these materials and sort of transform them, much like a poet would do with words to create poetry. This is moving towards the front door and then looking into the library. The library is 35,000 volumes. It looks out onto the garden. So all the spaces inside the building are oriented out to this garden. The library is on 2 levels. And it's all comprised of a Baltic birch plywood with a clear finish. You can see this kind of system where it starts in the library, moves around and forms the working library for the staff before it drops down to cover the performance space. This is some views of the gallery looking out to the garden and then looking towards the performance space where we have an image of Harriet Monroe. Harriet was the woman that started Poetry Magazine in 1912, and we felt that she should be remembered near the room where the poets go inside to read their work, against the backdrop of the garden outside. This was a vinyl transfer that we took an old photograph, digitized it, blew it up, and dot screened it, and then transferred it directly onto the architecture. This is an image inside of the performance space. So this is a very critical space. The charge here was to design a room that was perfect for the human voice. So a poet could read her work unmediated by technology. So there are 2 components to that. One was isolating the outside city noise. We wanted people to feel like they were a part of the city but removed from it at the same time. And then, of course, the room acoustics, or what the room sounds like inside of the room. This is a bamboo garden in which the main stair kind of wraps around in 3 runs, goes up to a landing and overlooks the garden. This is a view from the 2nd floor looking back down into the library, and here you get the sense of the garden being a spatial volume, almost another room of the building, albeit outside. And that space would be programmed as well. So outside they have poetry readings, magazine openings, and so forth. On the left is a sketch of this sort of idea of this kind of winding, snaking plywood wall, and then through which you would enter the sort of the private offices, and then outboard of which would be open office areas that would look down onto the garden below. So these are some views looking down onto the garden from the 2nd floor office space. On the left is looking down into the garden, and on the right is looking down into the gallery. This is a view looking back towards the library from the 2nd floor at dusk. These are some early studies of the screen wall, what quality the screen wall would have on the street. Eventually, we settled on a perforated oxidized zinc. I felt it was important to do a building should be colored black because black represents authority, and seriousness. And at the same time, it would lend the building a certain enigmatic, kind of mysterious quality. So to kind of intrigue people, to make them kind of look through it and say, what is this building, and make them want to enter this world. So this is, we developed the screen in kind of mock-ups and models, digital models and physical models, and then finally we built a full-size mock-up here, which is 12 feet wide and 36 feet tall. And here still we're working out some of the details of the screen. These are some drawings. Through the top is a section through the garden, and then the bottom is an elevation from the street, sort of this quality of sort of this veil-like quality, very diaphanous. These are some photos of the screen in its completed state. And on the right you can see where the corrugated metal is solid but becomes perforated at the garden to allow views into the garden. And then this quality of when viewed obliquely, the building would appear monolithic in solid, but when viewed frontally, it would have a sort of a veil-like quality. And then these are photographs of the final building that describe these qualities. On the left, this sort of more monolithic black box, and then this very sort of light, diaphanous quality. This is looking through the screen at night. And so in kind of a Japanese garden way, your eye stops at several layers, first at the screen, then at the trees, and then the glass beyond, and then the wall inside, to make the perceived depth feel much larger than the actual depth. The screen takes on different qualities according to the time and the weather conditions. This is in the kind of late afternoon where it becomes almost opaque, and then this is at dusk, the time when most of the poetry readings would be held. And then finally, one more a shot of looking through the screen. So this is a great addition to the cultural cultural institutions in Chicago, and I encourage you all to visit and go for a poetry reading next time you're in Chicago. Thank you very much.